The King's Avatar. Chapter 13:12 Another target to research. Audio source, wusharworldaudiobook.com. Chapter 13:12 Another target to research. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. And when Yu was stunned. Just as he wanted to reply, Zhang Xinji was already leaving to shake hands with the next member of Happy. It sounded like a casually spoken formality, but if it came from Zhang Xinji, then it wasn't just a courtesy. This strict tyranny vice-captain would only say something like this if there was enough proof to back it up. Happy hadn't been stingy in the support and trust they gave him. And Wen Yu was incredibly moved by this and had worked hard to repay them. However, there was always that voice of doubt. That voice of doubt grew louder and louder with each defeat. He was too rational, to the point where the care his team showed him couldn't penetrate the darkness in his heart. However, Zhang Xinji, the player he idolized, one known for his meticulousness, had said the words he had most need to hear at a time he needed them most. The darkness in his heart cleared as easily as that. This was perhaps so-called serendipity. He could do it, because if even Zhang Xinji thought so, then there was no way it could be otherwise. And when Yu's mind was filled with these voices, he raised his head, facing each member of Tyranny with a smile, shaking their hands. Happy had been defeated by Tyranny 2-8. This live broadcasted match didn't have many spectacular scenes to savor. The broadcasters regretted their decisions because the other Blue Rain vs Samsara match was unusually fierce, eventually ending in Blue Rain's victory of 7-3. After Samsara had lost to 100 Blossoms, they had another loss added to their score. Additionally, the lead they had on the second-ranked team had been reduced to under 20 points. Samsara's image of invincibility had finally loosened after their second loss. However, though this match was spectacular, the most unexpected match was the Thunderclaps' home game against 301 Degrees. The score ended in 1-9, Thunderclap being crushed. More importantly, the team, one that rivaled Samsara in strength, had been defeated once again. The reason? Yang Kong of 301 Degrees had used life-risking strike again to take out Xiao Shichin's life extinguisher. From Happy to Tyranny and now Thunderclap, this was the third time Yang Kong had struck with life-risking strike, taking out a vital member of the opposing team and giving his team the victory. Yang Kong, who originally didn't play such a style, had used it so crazily after switching styles. In 5 rounds, he had used life-risking strike 3 times, and even more terrifyingly, he had succeeded all 3 times. This use rate and success rate was suffocatingly impressive. Something else that should be taken note of was that apart from round 19, where the assassination of Little Cold Hands had been all up to Yang Kong, in round 20 against Zhang Xinji's immovable rock and this round against Xiao Shichin's life extinguisher, Bai Shu had been critical in both situations. What style did this guy have, and how was he so good at cooperating with 301 Degrees players? No one in the alliance had the answer, and each team had all looked towards England's Super League for reconnaissance on Bai Shu's ability. Everyone had sensed that 301 Degrees was on the rise. Don't just look at how they were only 9th on the current rankings, but 301 Degrees had recently all been pitted against strong teams, yet were still rising through the ranks. On the other hand, teams like Windhowl were against mid-lower tier teams, and only then did they seem unstoppable. If they were to meet a strong team and fall, then they might be tossed out of the top 8 with a pursuer like 301 Degrees behind them. 301 Degrees. Suddenly, they had become an unknown enemy. All the teams were researching them, including Happy. However, at Happy's current strength, it was difficult to obtain information from England's Super League. There was pitifully little videos they could find from searching the web. In the end, after looking all over, using VPN and cracking their devices, they had finally managed to connect to a video hosting service over in England and found info on the team. Bai Shu was once a part of the England Super League team, Sprout. Then, watching this team's videos, they were rather shocked. In that team, Bai Shu used a knight called Bao. Apart from this knight, there were 2 assassins in this team. In the team competition, these 2 assassins appeared together, and not in rotation. However, these team competitors were different from the Glory Pro Alliance. In the England Super League, team competitors were a 6v6. The style Sprout employed was the one 301 degrees was currently using, Assassin's Life-Risking Strike. Bai Shu's Bao had an important role in this team, covering for the 2 assassins and ensuring that their life-risking strike would hit. After watching the battle recordings, it was clear that Bai Shu wasn't only an expert at covering and supporting, but also doing all sorts of CC on the target when the assassins were preparing to use life-risking strike. In addition, he'd even helped deal the finishing blow to a weakened opponent when the life-risking strike wasn't enough. His awareness, methods, habits, none of it was something that could be summarized easily and quickly. They had to spend a lot of time to research. The big teams all felt depressed. Wasn't there enough to research from scratch this season? Ye Zhu's unspecialized Lord Grimm, Fang Rui's Dirty Chi Master, and now 301 degrees was going in, too, bringing in an expert that no one understood. There was nothing that could be done. No matter how troublesome, they still had to do it. However, Team Happy's luck could be considered the best. The next time they'd meet 301 degrees would be round 38, the last match of the season. They had plenty of time to research Bai Shu and 301 degrees, after Bai Shu's recruitment and Yang Kong's switch in playstyle. For Happy, what was more of a headache was the problem of their healer. After losing to Tyranny in the 23rd round, the hate against An Wenyi continued. Even Chang Xian, who always supported Happy, was expressing concern. He has talent. We believe in him. These words were no longer enough. The people need to see proof in their performance. WuxaWorldAudio.com. In round 24, Happy's away game was against Team Parade. With Happy's current performance, no one thought that a lower-ranked team like Parade would be enough to test An Wenyi's skills. It'll probably be just like when they beat Radiant 10-0, covering their healer's weakness with powerful offensive. But in this team competition, Happy was met with trouble. Did you think you could crush us like you did with Radiant? Don't be so arrogant. Parade's captain, grappler player Wu Shui yelled imposingly into the chat. Around 8 minutes after the battle started, Team Parade's formation was still very whole, but Team Happy's 1-inch Ash had already been wiped out. Happy was currently at a one-player disadvantage and Parade was launching a fierce offense, trying to defeat another of Happy's members before their 6th player arrived. It was all that guy's fault. The match wasn't being live broadcasted on TV, so the fans were mostly watching on TV. Previously, in the 1v1s, Happy had lost a point in the individual matches, taking a lead of 4-1. However, from the start of the team competition, they hadn't been able to grasp the initiative. Parade was very accurately aiming for Happy's weakness, little cold hands. Strategy, class, map choice, all of it was precisely planned. In the end, Qiao Yifan's 1-inch Ash had fallen to Parade, desperately trying to cover for little cold hands. When they saw this scene, Happy's supporters felt a ball of rage burn in their hearts. If it wasn't for him, the team wouldn't have had to retreat and fall to a disadvantage. If it wasn't for him, Qiao Yivan would have been better able to set up his ghost boundaries. If it wasn't for him, Qiao Yifan's 1-inch ash wouldn't have lost so much health. It was him. It was all him. Even I can do better than him. Many fans slammed their keyboard in rage. And now, after killing 1-inch ash, Parade was targeting Fang Rui's Boundless Sea. Fuck. They might as well not have a cleric. Quote. In the online stream, the comment section was filled with such jeers. This was something none of Happy's members could see. All they knew was that the situation wasn't looking good for them at all. They also knew that if they lost this round, the last barrier protecting Wenyi from criticism would fall. Though the team could have faith in him as usual, what about himself? After defeat, each a blow to his self-confidence. If this time, they lost to Parade because of his mistakes, then it would probably be a critical strike. Could he still hold on after something like that? Hey, great healer in. We're attacking your Boundless Sea, you know. Can you still manage to keep him alive? The captain of Team Parade continued to trash talk in the chat, unafraid of revealing their intentions. They had planned it this way anyways. Don't panic, it's not as bad as he says. Yishu sent into the team chat. Understood. Surprisingly, he gained such a reply. Yishu was stunned. This was a simple reply, but if and when Yi could still type, then that means he hadn't panicked at all. He had kept his calm, observing the battlefield and waiting for the time when he would be need. Meanwhile, he could easily find time to respond to Yishu when he wasn't need. Very good. Yishu, based on this conjecture, had given a response to Wenyi's reply. The audience all thought that it was Wenyi who had dragged the entire team down. However, in Yishu's eyes, Wenyi hadn't made any serious mistakes this match. The one who had performed poorly was Qiao Yivan. He was too nervous, too set on covering little cold hands that he had worked himself into a mess, desynchronizing with the pacing of the team. Is there any need to heal Boundless Sea? Yishu mocked back in the public chat as he charged forward. End chapter.
The King's Avatar, Chapter 1313. Just in Time. Audio source, wuxia-world-audiobook.com. Chapter 1313. Just in Time. Translator, Gnome Yummy. Editor, Gnome Yummy. He's coming. Wu Shuai yelled into the parade chat. Their focused defense on Boundless Sea was just because they wanted to lure Lord Grim over, wiping out Qiao Yifan's 1-inch ash. This result wasn't something that satisfied them. Though they acted confident, in reality, Happy, even lacking one player, still threatened them greatly. However, if they could send Lord Grim out of the running, then their victory would be certain. Their encirclement of Boundless Sea was to lure Yishu over into trying to save him. Their true target was Lord Grim. Prepare. Wu Shuai ordered. Parade's team members clearly weren't properly trying to beat Boundless Sea, all waiting for a chance to lunge in the other direction. There's a plot. Quote. This naturally wouldn't escape the master of dirty play, Fang Rui, and he quickly sent a warning in the happy chat. Worry not. Yishu replied as Lord Grim continued his advance. Switch. Wu Shuai ordered, and Team Parade surrounded their target. In an instant, it wasn't Boundless Sea in the encirclement, but Lord Grim. Scared yet? Fang Rui hollered in the chat. This time, it fell to him to save Lord Grim. However, Team Parade hadn't truly formed an encirclement around him, but they did around Lord Grim, and it seemed much stronger. Would they be alright? Fang Rui wondered in his heart, observing Team Parade's formation and trying to find a chance to team up with and break Yishu out. That was when, with a boom, someone was sent flying out of Parade's sturdy encirclement with a falling flower palm from Lord Grim, and the latter broke out easily. A paper match encirclement. Fang Rui would never miss out on a chance to mock his opponents. What happened? Wu Shuai yelled angrily into the team chat. He naturally wouldn't send this into the public chat and draw jeers from his opponents. "How come my skills are on cooldown?" the one sent flying by Lord Grimm yelped. "No, not cooldown. They've been sealed." "Sacred fire? When?" that person added. "Sacred fire?" The people watching the live stream all froze. When was sacred fire used? The parade members on the battlefield had already turned their gazes to Little Cold Hands. Their teammate naturally wouldn't lie to them. Did Little Cold Hands strike just now? No one knew. In that moment, they had completely ignored Little Cold Hands, as if the cleric were nothing but air. It was probably Lord Grimm. Someone suddenly called out. The entire team suddenly seemed to realize something. Lord Grimm's myriad manifestations umbrella could have all sorts of skills set into its different forms. He must have set a sacred fire into the weapons priest class form. That guy was a sly bastard like that, always switching the skills he had on his weapon so that he could mess with everyone. Good job. When his opponent was about to defend, a sacred fire began to burn under Yi Shu's surprised gaze, sealing that member of Parade's skills. The skill he was about to use to block Lord Grimm never came, allowing him to break through with a simple falling flower palm. Again, Team Parade, believing that they had already found the crux of the problem, turned and pursued Lord Grimm. Sky-piercing strike. However, Fang Rui's boundless sea had already arrived to help, pushing his palms out and shooting forth a blast of chi. The parade characters in each area getting blasted off their feet. Their offensive had been shattered. With their offensive gone, Happy was free to launch their own. They might be one head short for now, but they wouldn't let this opportunity pass them by. Shincut, slide kick, knee strike. Lord Grimm activated 3 skills in rapid succession, arriving in front of a character in the blink of an eye and sending them flying. Pulse break strength. Fang Rui's boundless sea shot by jabbing the character twice. The target's stats immediately plummeted. At the same time, a ring of light descended and Little Cold Hands' holy commandment blanketed them just in time. With all these damage-increasing statuses, if they didn't attack now, then when should they? Their target had no way to stop their remaining health from decreasing, and it dropped like a rock. Having been knocked completely out of it, the members of Parade hurriedly adjusted themselves to counterattack and save their teammate. However, the 3 members of Happy didn't seem to be able to take their eyes off their target, ignoring all the attacks that came their way and continuing their crazed barrage of attacks. Were they planning on wiping him out first? They would choose to do that with a numbers disadvantage? That was a huge challenge for their own healer. However, wasn't Happy's healer the worst in the alliance? Could he really hold this situation steady? Interrupt. Wu Shuai yelled. Interrupt what? The team members were confused. Their healer, Wu Shuai, was vexed. They need him to explain such a simple arrangement. Where is the healer? Huh? Wu Shuai turned his view in a full circle, but he really couldn't find Little Cold Hands. Where'd he hide? Quote, just now, everyone had been so focused on dodging the blasts. WuShuaWorldAudio.com. Fuck. Wu Shuai yelled in rage. It would be better if they didn't bother for now. Save him first. Wu Shuai ordered. They continued to launch their attacks at the 3 attackers, but those 3 really were stubborn, persisting with their offense. Their attacks struck that poor character while Team Parade's attacks struck them. Focus on Lord Grimm. Wu Shuai hollered. If they successfully made such a trade, then it was really worth it. Don't run, please don't run. Lord Grimm really didn't run. He simply made sure that Parade's attacks wouldn't disrupt his own damage. He just took it. Parade instantly became more enthusiastic. They had finally taken out a significant chunk of Lord Grimm's health when a light suddenly washed over him and erupted, turning all of their screen white. This was a great heal that crit. Instantly, Lord Grimm's health skyrocketed. Though it didn't completely negate all of Parade's efforts, what it healed made Parade feel powerless. Their underestimation of Little Cold Hands was destroying them. Did no one notice? Open your eyes wider. Wu Shuai demanded. Thus, when Little Cold Hand's heel came over once more, someone finally noticed where the holy light of the cross was coming from. 9 o'clock. The member of parade that had found Little Cold Hands yelled, "Go and grab him," Wu Shuai said, finally sending someone to deal with Little Cold Hands. Seeing that he had been exposed, and when he had Little Cold Hands run without hesitation. However, the current garb that Little Cold Hands had on wasn't the movement speed equipment he had during the Challengers League. After focusing all his stats on healing, Little Cold Hands' movement speed began to display the weakness that was typical to healers. Run. Where could he run to? And when he had barely ran anywhere, when he heard the sound of approaching footsteps. His pursuer was using skills to catch up to him, and it didn't take long before the other had caught up. "I've caught him," the parade member excitedly reported. Yet that was when Little Cold Hands suddenly came to a halt and turned around, as if having given up. What the hell was this? The parade member felt a moment of suspicion rise in his heart when, boom! Dragon breaks the ranks. Happy's sixth player, Soft Mist, had arrived. Just in time. Quote, "And when you even had the time to type. Nice train driving," Tang Ru complimented back. A train was a gaming term that referred to luring a large group of mobs into a specified position for attack. The more precise the positioning, the better the train. "Let's go." She ignored the person she had knocked flying and charged towards the battlefield over yonder. Shattering the lands. Soft Mist announced her arrival with a high-level skill, jumping high into the air. Her spear dancing fire flowing flame making a red trail through the air as it fell with its wielder, a blazing Soft Mist. Boom! She knocked someone into the air and then, in the blink of an eye, had landed with a shattering the lands over here. Parade's members fumbled respond, dodging out of sync. This strike had once again destroyed their formation. "Wipe out this one first," Yishu called out. Tang Ru didn't bother with a type response, using her actions to show that she understood. Dancing fire flowing flame swinging at its target's weak points. Interrupt the healer. Yishu gave another order. Currently, they had completely taken the upper hand. If they didn't wipe this guy out of the game, then they'd have wasted this chance. Then, Yushu and Sumachung repeatedly switched targets in synchronization, using ranged attacks to interrupt the healer's support. Tang Ru and Feng Rui focused completely on DPS and when Yi's Little Cold Hands had run over too, regrouping with the others. Finally, their target fell, and Happy dismantled Parade's lead. The healer, Yishu, made a swift decision. Currently, it was Happy that had the advantage in numbers on the field. The entire team lunged for their opponent's healer at once. Wipe him out. Happy's members surrounded Parade's healer, tossing attacks over in rapid succession. At the same time, they paid careful attention to Team Parade's attempts at support. Parade struck left and right but couldn't rescue their healer. With the healer under siege, they couldn't recover health, and the characters that came to try and provide support took heavy damage. At first, everyone thought that Happy was trying to wipe out the other's healer. But looking closer, they realized that they had actually kidnapped their healer and were slowly chipping away at the health of the rest of their members. Attack their healer. Realizing that they couldn't continue like this, Wu Shuai hurriedly gave new orders. Parade's members immediately charged at Little Cold Hands. "Hey, didn't you say our healer was useless? Is this trade worth it?" Yishu mocked. End chapter.
The King's Avatar, Chapter 13-14. Team MVP. Audio source, WuxuaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 13-14. Team MVP. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Yishu's mockery caused Parade's captain Wu Shuai feel his heart skip a beat. This exchange really was imbalanced. Happy's healer was such trash. But aside from this, what else could they do right now? You couldn't afford to hesitate in a match. Wu Shuai was very decisive when he needed to be, so even though his heart jolted, he didn't waver. He continued to lead his team members to charge towards Little Cold Hands. And Wen Yi didn't waste any time. As soon as he saw people rushing toward him, he cast a great cure on his own Little Cold Hand, pulling his health very high. Then, Parade began their attack. But when Wu Shuai looked over at Happy's progress on the other side, he wanted to cry. This wasn't a problem of whether this trade was balanced. This trade might not even be completed in the first place. Happy was progressing much faster in killing off their target. Bring him away. Wu Shuai hurried to direct. As they attacked, they tried to pull Little Cold Hands away, to buy themselves more time to kill him off. Not fast enough. Quote, and Wen Yi, the one who couldn't control a situation even when putting his all into a battle, actually found the time to type words right now, even when he was being surrounded and attacked from all sides. Indeed, they weren't fast enough. Wu Shuai didn't lack judgment, he just wanted to put his all into striving for this goal. But when Wen Yi said this, he understood that Happy had calculated everything. Anything that he did was futile. It ends here. Wu Shuai understood very clearly that this match was going to be decided right here. Wu Shuai sighed and watched as their team's healer finally fell. And Little Cold Hands. Even after being surrounded, the character still had a third of her health left. What if we copied them? Wu Shuai suddenly had another thought, to try and learn from the way Happy had surrounded Parade's healer. But before he could give any orders, a satellite beam was already falling from the sky, a spinning pillar of light that expanded. Parade's members instinctively began to dodge, and their encirclement was broken just like that. There was no way. They had no healer anymore. Wu Shuai discovered what the difference was between their current situation and that of Happy earlier. At that time, Happy had their healer helping out, while Parade's healer had been cut off in the encirclement. That was why they could play to wear them out. But now, even if they locked Little Cold Hands in an encirclement, they didn't have a healer to support them anymore, and stubbornly trying to maintain this encirclement would only use up even more of their health. There was really no way. Wu Shuai once again felt that they were at the end, and this time he finally didn't experience any new breakthroughs. By the time Parade's sixth player arrived, they were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, and they still didn't have a healer. They couldn't turn the situation around. Wu Shuai actually began to feel a sense of longing for that Little Cold Hand, the one deemed by the entirety of Glory to be worst pro-cleric. Right now, even if they only had a cleric like that, would they lose? Absolutely not. They were unwilling, but they could only fall. In the end, Parade couldn't defeat Happy and the team competing and lost in a bitter 1-9. In the post-match press conference, the reporters asked Wu Shuai for his feelings about this match. He said the standard polite words, but as he talked and talked, he gradually began to think seriously. Where was the match point of this team battle? The beginning had gone so smoothly, they'd easily killed off one of the opponents. With that kind of lead, how come they fell over like a toppled mountain by the end? Wu Shuai pulled himself back to the match. In that moment when they had killed off Happy's phantom demon 1-inch Ash pretended to surround Boundless Sea, lured in Lord Grimm, surrounded him. But then Lord Grimm, with a thrust of his palm, casually escaped from the encirclement that they had prepared so carefully. And the reason was that the character supposed to intercept him was unexpectedly hit by a heavenly fire and became unable to use any skills. It had happened so quickly during the match, there wasn't any time to analyze it. Parade just thought that it was a skill that Lord Grimm had put on the Myriad Manifestations umbrella, but was that really the case? Wu Shuai recalled that moment in detail. Lord Grimm was surrounded, and then he immediately tried to rush outwards. Sacred Fire was a skill that required reciting lines. Where did he have the time to stop and cast? It was Little Cold Hands. It was Onwenu. Yes, that was correct. That was exactly how it happened. And then Happy counterattacked, scattering their formation, and the match situation was instantly flipped around. The match point was when Lord Grim instantly broke through their encirclement. And that had been the result of that cleric, who'd been looked down upon by them, no, looked down upon by the entire Glory Circle. If it weren't for his move then, no matter how high Yishu's skill was, he couldn't have immediately pushed open a road with one palm. Parade's brothers weren't noobs, after all. That guy was really lucky. When Wu Shuai thought this problem through, this was his final conclusion. Ultimately, he still didn't believe that Onwenu had such ability. He still felt that that player was just a blind cat that had run into a dead mouse. But since he'd already thought to this point, he couldn't help but think more about Little Cold Hand's performance this match. And after doing so, he discovered that that player had appeared again and again at the crucial points of the match. We lost to that cleric. Impossible. Wu Shuai suddenly said aloud. What's impossible? What did you say was impossible just now? The reporters had been listening to another player from Parade answer a question, but when they suddenly heard this word from Wu Shuai's mouth, they immediately turned their attention toward him. Happy's cleric isn't so simple, Wu Shuai said. The reporters all snickered. What was he saying? He couldn't beat Happy, so he didn't even agree what Happy's weak point was anymore. How petty. With your strength, it was no big surprise that you weren't able to beat Happy. Do you really need to make excuses like this? Wu Shuai's words didn't incite any excitement from the reporters. They continued their interviews, until Parade's conference was over and Happy's began. And then, the first sentence they heard from Yishu's lips was praise for Onwenu. Today's victory was all thanks to Onwenu's outstanding performance. Onwenu. Outstanding performance. Putting these two phrases together, how come it felt so conflicting? Could they really be written together? The reporters felt a bit dizzy. What? Did no one notice? Yishu asked, extremely surprised, as he watched all the reporters exchange glances. He added, WushAWorldAudio.com. Did you watch the match? Of course, the reporters all answered. Did the stats for this match come out yet? Yishu suddenly asked the alliance worker at the side. They're out, that person answered. Who was the team competitor MVP? Yishu asked. Onwenu. The alliance employee gave the answer from the stats. Huh? The gathered reporters were shocked. Yishu grinned. I'm glad that the alliance was watching the match seriously. The reporters were greatly embarrassed. Onwenu was the MVP of this match. The reporters forgot the interview and all began discussing with each other, but everyone only had a fuzzy impression of Onwenu's performance in the match. Before they watched the match, they were already in a certain mindset. Matches should be enjoyed, but they didn't have that mindset toward Onwenu, so much so that even though they were glory specialists, they hadn't even realized the MVP of this team competition. Without being able to figure out the why, this press conference couldn't continue. The reporters could only bring out a few scripted questions, like asking Onwenu about his view of his performance today. I did the right things at the right times. Onwenu said. Oh, could you give us some detail? The reporters asked. You should just rewatch the match. Quote. Onwenu was a bit speechless. They wanted him to use words to describe his performance. It wasn't that he was disdainful, he was rather embarrassed, because those were all his highlights. He couldn't just open his mouth and say, at that most critical moment, good thing I used my sacred fire, or whatnot. He was Onwenu, not Wei Chen. The press conference ended inconclusively like this. By the end, the reporters still had questions in their hearts. They didn't understand how and when Yi became the hero of this match. After the conference finished, they all immediately revisited the match, and now that they were in the mindset of looking for highlights, these specialists quickly realized what they had missed during this match. This was too unprofessional. And when Yi found his footing, the reporters wondered. And when Yi, whom the entire Glory Circle viewed as dragging down his team, suddenly became the team MVP. Wasn't this change just too dramatic? The reporters of the various media were all already imaging the articles to write about in Wenyi. The match between Happy and Parade originally wasn't anything interesting to report on. But now that Wenyi had become the MVP of this match, this topic was really quite incredible. As for those looking for thrilling headlines in this round, Simsara's home game against Tiny Herb and Tyranny's home game against Blue Rain were both top-level confrontations. In the end, both matches ended with the home team's victory, both 7-3. Tiny Herb's win streak in the group arena was finally broken in this round. Of all the consecutive win records in this season, only Yi Xiu's individual win streak had yet to be sniped. In this round, Wind Howl, who'd been swaggering with their recent win streak against weak teams, finally ate a loss. And this time, their opponent absolutely couldn't be called a strong team. Miracle, one of the new teams this season, played their home game against Wind Howl and ultimately defeated them 7-3. In the confrontation between previous excellent era players, it was actually the seemingly lower, lagging members of Miracle that obtained victory. Wind Howl was the team that defeated many weak teams to appear strong. But after this loss, their standing on the rankings immediately changed. Right now, they were 7th place with 148 points, followed by 100 Blossoms only 1 point behind them. After that, 9th place was the recently strong 301. After defeating Royal Style 8-2 in their home game this round, there were now only 7 points between them and the playoff zone. But this time, 301 didn't use the fierce life-risking strike again. End chapter.